let's shift gears and talk about the band Big Little Lions, which you can tell us when you started and everything. And Helen Austin, who I interviewed for the last Passenger Profile, is your partner in that band. And she was quick to point out not his partner in life. He's got a wife, she has a husband, but they are married in the context of the band, certainly. And you guys have been together for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was just getting to know you, I'd probably known you for about a year or so. And then I heard something from Helen that was submitted to Taxi. And I threw, let's see if you still remember this, but I had like a little, not an open mic, a showcase, I guess, with like 5 or 6 or 7 acts up in the presidential suite at the Westin LAX,
Yeah.
and had a couple A&R people, a couple film and TV people, and I literally put you and Helen on the list of artists to play, hoping that you guys would get to know each other because the old producer, I heard your two vocal sounds and thought they would go together really well, and your overall artistic vibe, for a very California word. And I thought these guys have to meet each other. I think you probably met each other maybe even on a panel or somewhere at the road rally before that night. But to the best of my knowledge, that was the genesis of what eventually became Big Little Lions. Am I giving myself too much credit?
No, you were right. I remember that. I remember being up in that room and, like Helen and I didn't spend a ton of time together at that rally. That was 2011.
Wow,
Uh, yeah, we were on the successful members panel
that's
together.
right.
And so we first met. There was what, 12 of us or something on that. And I met a lot of folks through that one. That was my first rally. And, yeah, Helen always talks about how we all went to dinner together after that in the hotel restaurant. And I think she was kind of sitting next to me, but she was making a comment to someone that she didn't like the co-write. She had some bad experiences, so that was that. So we met, but we didn't start working together till about a year later when she approached me to do some production on a children's album she was working on. Uh, and I didn't sing then. I did 4 songs on that album that I produced, did all the music for, but that went on to win a Juno.
Right.
And the first track that I did for that, we won the John Lennon songwriting contest from that as well. But yeah, so that after doing that, it was a few months later, or maybe even a month later, where she approached me. Her publisher was looking for Of Monsters and Men, Lumineers style stuff, guy girl singing, and so she approached me with that, sent me a song. Uh, yeah, I started production on it, and then as soon as we started singing together, it was like, this works. I mean, it was hard not to sing in a British accent. But
Yeah, for those of you who don't know
she's
Helen, she's British
yeah,
and used to
yeah.
be
She lives on Vancouver Island. She lives about 2,500 miles away from me. So
wow.
everything was, internet, Dropbox or email, tracks were sent that way. So she would send her vocal tracks, and I would sing along with it and try not to sing in a British accent. But yeah, we were just going to write together, and because we had internet and we did a few songs that way, and we started doing a lot of songs. The very first song that we did ended up just for the long game for Taxi Members. That was 2012. Uh, that ended up, like maybe 5 years ago, it ended up in a Gold Peak Tea ad.
Wow.
Almost 10 years later after
So
we had,
you signed it 10 years before it ever got used. And the
yeah,
point you're making is an important one for members. It's like, I got forwarded, I got signed, and now here we are 4 months later. And do you believe this publisher hasn't
yeah.
gotten me a sync yet? Talk about the long game a little bit because you've been in the game long enough to know the long game very well, I'm sure.
It's a very long game. Yeah, and it can get frustrating even when you have thick skin because you have to grow thick skin to be in this business. But it can be like, where are they? But yeah, it's just that's the nature of the business. Your song might not be right for that initial pitch, but if a publisher signs it, means they like it, means they like what they hear, and they've got a good ear for it. and they know that eventually it could potentially get used. Um, and that's exactly what happened with that track. It just happened to be the right fit for what a supervisor was looking for at the time. Um, yeah, you can't. It's just like the weather. You can't ask it to do something that you want it to do. It's going to do what it wants,
That's
and
a good.
it's
I may have to print that out and put it on the door to my office. I put my favorite quotes from taxi members on my office door sometimes to ground me as I walk in and out of the door. Um,
yeah,
that's interesting. It's like the weather.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So Helen and I just we started writing tons together for this particular publisher she was with. They kept sending us briefs, and so we wrote tons of music. But it was eventually that uh, they said you guys should be a band.
oh,
Like
so it was them that had the idea, and
they, yeah, because they could sell us easier.
that's where I was going with this. There was a movement, I guess you could call it, within the sync community that all of a sudden everybody, especially for TV commercials, but even for like dramatic shows versus reality, they were looking for authentic artists. And I believe that a lot of people could be fooled into thinking something is authentic, but as long as they thought it was authentic and they could tell everybody else in the conference room, yeah, they're a real working band, somehow that had some, it made it more
Leverage.
attractive.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that. I thought I was going to ask you what was the impetus for forming Big Little Lions. So it was a publisher that said you guys should be a band, and do you think that they were suggesting it for that reason that it would be easier for
Yes.
them to market you? Interesting. And how did you guys react to the suggestion?
Yeah, we were fine with it. We were like, well, at first, we were just going to be a online writing duo,
Hmm.
and creating a band name or whatever didn't change that much at first. It was just like, all right, now we're called this, and we'll keep writing songs to briefs. But eventually, both of us had, a performing past. Uh, so I think it was like not even a year after that where we decided to try to perform these songs, which we knew wouldn't be easy because we live over 2,000 miles apart. But yeah, I showed up in Vancouver Island. My first time to Canada, by the way, 2014.
Well, it's a
Um,
great place to go for your first trip there. It's
yes,
gorgeous.
yeah, we go every year. Uh, but yeah, so that just evolved into a performance duo as well. I mean, it took a long time to try to develop the live performances, but because recording at home online, you can put whatever you want on
Yeah.
a track. You can throw the kitchen sink in there, and so it was, replicating that live is a challenge, but I think we've pulled it off. Now we're just two people that play tons of instruments at once.
So let's talk about the challenges of being a touring band. I think Helen mentioned that you guys have, like tried a manager or a booker or whatever, but ultimately you landed on doing all that stuff yourself. You book your own shows, you do your own advance work, you're your own PR team, you're your own management team. Most artists, I think, live for the day and have this fantasy that yes, I'm good enough that I will attract a team. They will be awesome and do all this amazing stuff for me. And all I have to do is just keep writing great songs and being, great on stage. How, why didn't it work out that having a team of people to do those other tasks? Why do you guys, why did you end up doing it? And why is it better with you doing it?
Well, we did have a team. We had two great managers. COVID killed a lot of that. Uh, they were Canadian-based managers, and as soon as COVID hit, we were on a upswing. We were touring a lot. I mean, we don't go out for months on end, but we had pretty consistent. At least 3, 4 times a year we would go out on tour, which is a pretty tough challenge for people that live very far apart.
And when you say a tour, are you talking 5 cities over 2 weeks, or are you talking 3 months on the road playing
No,
four
we're
gigs?
talking max about 16 days. But
Okay.
we would do mostly Canada. Um, but we would go from, sometimes from Vancouver Island where Helen lives, and we'd take the ferry across and go all the way into Alberta. One trip we went in all the way into Saskatchewan and back.
Wow, that's a
Um,
cruise.
that was a cruise, and that was in the winter.
Whoa, baby.
Yeah, right. Talk about crossing your fingers. Yeah, you're gonna make it through the mountain passes. But yeah, COVID changed a lot of that and kind of forced us to do it on our own because these booking agents and managers, they were just like there was nobody to book, and so like we need to find another line of work right now. Um, so yeah, it was just kind of like Helen does majority of our PR and everything, and I do all the production. So that's kind of our team. It's like I'm busily working on production for songs, um, and she's really good at her PR end of it. So she's got that nailed down because she was doing that a little bit before we even came in contact with management.
For her
Um,
career. She was like
no,
oh, okay, because I
well,
know
she was a
she
comedian,
performed and did comedy as well, like musical
right?
comedy.
No, she was doing it with for us when we first started booking a lot of stuff, and then when it started growing more is when some management people came on board. Uh, but so she already kind of had knowledge and contacts um, of where to book and who
And
to
she's kind of
contact.
fearless and spunky, just her nature, her
Yeah,
personality is like, no challenge is going to stop me kind
yeah,
of lady.
yeah,
So she's perfect for that gig because, yeah, talk about having thick skin, trying to get booked, especially before you guys were a brand. And, it's like,
yeah,
why should I book you and not somebody local or somebody we've worked with 10 times?
yeah, yeah. So I think our early success as far as having a Juno and winning a Canadian Folk Music Award helped uh, because we do, like I said, we mainly book in Canada. The States are tough to book. We've done a couple tours on the West Coast, and they're tough, a lot tougher
Why?
to
Why?
book.
Just because there's so many other artists competing for those slots?
Yeah, it's so big. Canada, you know, we do a lot of festivals in Canada, and they treat you really well and pay you really well. They get a lot of grants. There's a lot of grants that go out to artists and festivals and things like that up there. So it's just more. I guess it's not kinder to smaller time artists. You know, you try to play a festival in the States, and they're gonna maybe give you $100 and say, "Hey, you're getting exposure at this big festival we got." So there's a difference. There's a huge difference there. Um, yeah. So I mean, we had the basis of. I think we're both driven. So to be able to put these tours together that Helen can, and then put these songs together, both of our strengths are coming together in that way. Um,
Do you find that how many songs do you have signed to various publishers? Just a ballpark guesstimate on that.
well, between you know songs and instrumentals, it's got to be over 3 or 4 thousand, I would
It's a
say.
lot. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
and
glad you
most of
brought up
those
it.
are instrumentals.
I'm
But
glad you brought that up because I actually wrote a question. Most of your stuff that's out there, songs or instrumentals, because songs, of course, are much less frequently licensed. The payday is bigger. And the shows that it lands on will be bigger, and a lot of
mhm.
times it's the last 3 minutes of the episode, in a montage or something where it gets a lot of love and attention. Um, I honestly didn't know that you do instrumentals. And so let's talk about that for a moment. Are the instrumentals also in the same genre orbit as your songs with lyrics would be, or do you do like tension cues or dramedy cues, that sort of kind of standard library stuff as well?
It veers into that, but it's still within my style. Um, I think the people that approach approach me to do instrumentals know my strengths anyway as a songwriter. They've heard my style, and so if I do a tension cue, it's usually within a folky, acoustic vibe anyway.
Hillbilly tension.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah. I went through a long stretch where mostly what I was doing was instrumentals. I'd only write music with Helen. I haven't actually done many songs on my own in a bit. Here and there, they're sparse because I started getting so much instrumental work. And I wouldn't say that they're easy to just churn out because you still got to make them interesting within a minute, 30 seconds or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that just happens to be where most of the back end is in instrumental music because it does get used so frequently, mainly reality shows and things like that, but those are replaying constantly.
I wonder, I'm going to have to start paying more attention. I don't watch a lot of reality TV, but I do watch a lot of stuff on like Science Channel, History Channel, that uses a ton of library music. And really had no idea you were doing instrumentals. So, I mean, it's so easy for me when I hear a song of yours with your voice or Helen's voice, I instantly know it's you guys.
Yeah.
I'm now going to have to start listening to instrumentals because, yeah, your style might be recognizable even without your voice in there. Interesting. Can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are even some instrumentals where, they want vocal shouts or
Right.
vocal affects. So I do that a bit, but yeah, I have a theme song for a veterinarian reality show. I don't even know if it's still running, but it was called Critter Fixers. But they used one of my tracks for the theme song, and that show did a lot. They played a lot, and I got a lot of back end for that
Nice.
show.
You call up friends and neighbors, come on over tonight. My theme song on Critter Fixers is going to debut. Order up
Yeah,
some
right,
Dominoes and a sixer.
right.
Woohoo, Critter
Yeah,
Fixers.
I mean, there's tons of taxi members. The old guard of taxi that they work a lot in instrumental music.
That would be
Matt
my
Hurt.
choice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's if you have the skills to produce and you can play music, you could put it together. You just gotta learn to make it interesting.
I think a lot of people don't realize when they see the word composer, they think of somebody who is like, holding a baton and conducting an orchestra.
Yeah,
That you've got to sit down and chart everything. And, Paul Otten is a composer. Maybe your first instrumental was you doing, something with an acoustic guitar, just doing arpeggiated strums with a harmonica part over it, or maybe a little mandolin fill or something, but just really
yeah,
basic stuff because that stuff gets used every day.
yeah,
For those of you watching this, if you think the word composer connotates only orchestral or like you needed to go to music school and study that stuff, no, it could be two or three instruments. You could record the whole thing in like an hour. And it could be the thing that makes you the most money because it's simple and usable, and a lot of shows think that
yeah,
fits. So that's
yeah.
good. And have you experienced I always say that having a catalog of instrumental music is better than having a stock portfolio because the stock portfolio can take a dive, as we saw a couple of days ago. Ouch.
Yes, yes,
But a portfolio of, 500, 1,000, 2 or 3 or 4,000 tracks that are out there in 10 or 15 different libraries. Um, it's cumulative over time,
yeah.
and a lot of that stuff ends up getting used years after you made it and signed it, as you exemplified earlier in our conversation. So
Well, it also has led to me using different sounds in the songs I write, either with Helen or on my own, because I'm playing around with different sounds for little instrumental tracks.
give an
You
example,
know, I don't know, like
not to
some of
put
the
you on the
sampling
spot
that
or
I do,
anything.
sampling of glockenspiel, my own glockenspiel, and using brushes on it, or you know, I don't know, just different vocal noises that I've I've created. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool to. It's a cool percussive sound or something like that. Banjolele, you know, sounds. A lot of brushwork on different weird instruments or things that aren't instruments. Uh, it's just a lot of it's percussive. The things that have come out of instrumental work that are unique of what I've come up with. Different percussive modes, slaps, or just not tapping your fingers on a desk,
Yeah.
close mic'd, and like it's just like an interesting sound. I don't know.
How do you know? Because people will get inspired when they hear that, and I hope they do, and I hope that they go get experimental. Because yeah, you can hear if you listen to 1,000 dramedy cues, they're all going to sound.
Yeah,
They
out of the
will
box.
almost all of them have the same instrumentation. Maybe a
Yes.
different melody, maybe a different tempo or a different attitude or mood, but they will all be very close in instrumentation. I've always contended, yeah, come up with a part that's familiar, but do it on a different instrument. Just make it 10 or 15% different so that the editor goes, oh, that one's interesting. So, how do
Yeah.
you know the difference between that's interesting and that's a little weird and makes it unusable? Do you just instinctively draw that line?
Yeah, I think you kind of do. I mean, I think I got the inspiration from, I think you would hit me up about a commercial pitch. Like you called me. This is
Mhm.
probably 11, 12 years ago and said, they're looking for this quirky track. You could use buckets or something, play buckets on it or something like that, and that kind of spawned doing some tracks. I don't even know if that track got placed, but I think that started me like, all right, I'm gonna grab the pots and pans and like play those on this track with a brush or with, something weird. Uh, but yeah, if something's not working, if it's like driving your ear nuts to hear it, it's sticking
And
out too much, or a
I,
publisher will tell you, I've done some tracks and the publisher came back or the supervisor that was for came back and was like that whatever baritone ukulele part was, ooh, it's just not working for that. So you learn by feedback as well, not just trusting your own ear. Because sometimes you think something's really cool.
right.
So you do have to listen to feedback, um, you know, from your publisher or from a music supervisor, because it's
Not
what
to
they
plug,
want.
not to plug my own Taxi TV episode, but the one that I did a couple of days ago, this past Monday, uh, a lot of newer members that want to get into sync don't know what a developmental arc is. They don't know what a buttoned ending is versus a stinger ending. There's a lot they don't know. When they see a listing says instrumental track, they think, oh, I can just do like what I normally do, but mute the vocal track, and there you go. So I did this episode and also showed kind of a modified waveform so that I could point things out. It's one of maybe the only time where I've had like a live screen come in from my computer during an episode. Anyway, if you have some time, go watch that episode and listen. You will appreciate these tracks are from a library. I would call it a top shelf, high quality library.
Hmm.
The tracks aren't amazing. Like people that are listening thinking, oh, I need to create like the hit record equivalent of an instrumental track, probably aren't at that part of their career yet where they understand you can make something that's kind of typical, kind of boring, but by thinking like an editor and crafting your arrangement so that it makes it really easy for the editor to find usable sections, because a lot of newbies think, oh, they're going to use my whole 100-second
Right.
cue. They don't realize that most of the time it's going to be a 17-second placement or a 31-second placement, whatever. Please watch that episode. You'll be
Yeah.
smiling and maybe even listen on headphones, because when you hear the nuance, there's one track that's kind of a softish, modern, feel good. It's going to be a really nice day kind of piece of music. But I listened to that and went, I'm not that impressed by the track, but I'm blown away by the masterful way that the composer laid out those parts. It accomplished right out of the box what stems would be used for, where an editor is going to trim things down or add things
Right.
back to make it have a better flow or more interesting in the scene.
Yeah.
This composer thought of so much of that and put it in there. It's like one of the most usable pieces of instrumental music I've ever heard. So check
Yeah.
that out. You'll like it.
Starts and stops are key.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
editors like
and
that.
there's this misconception. The thing that drove me to do the episodes, there's a misconception with people that you have to have a big ass rest for an edit point. They don't understand that a kick drum, a snare drum, a cymbal crash, anything with some sort of percussive aspect to it is a really good edit point.
Hmm.
So starts and stops, people, when they realize that they need those, they often build in like a full rest. And it just makes it harder for editors
Yeah.
because you've got this gap. And a lot of editors, if they're new to cutting music, will drop their razor blade, electronic razor blade, in the middle of the gap, not realizing they should be closer to where that percussive sound starts. You want to be right in front of that. Anyway, there's so
Yeah.
much to know.
Yeah,
Um,
I learned about button endings and all that stuff from maybe it was like one of your first or second Taxi TV lives I watched, and you were doing a whole overview on that, and
I
I
don't
was
know
like,
if you ever saw the one where I took my kids back when they were little kids, took their little plastic furniture and set it up in the backyard. We've got a view of a mountain range in our backyard that's like a
yeah,
mile away from our back door. And I put like a chair here and a chair there and then a table there and said, okay, that's the kick drum, that's the lead, trying to
yeah, yeah,
demonstrate panning using children's toys. And it worked. Now I look
yeah.
back at that and I go, oh my God, I can't believe I actually put that out there, but it did work.
We all got to
Um,
start somewhere.
has is there anything that you've noticed about how the sync market has changed or evolved in the years that you've been doing it?
um, there's I think there's subtle changes. I think just from watching shows, there's a lot of bigger shows that are using, they must have huge budgets because there's a lot of, I've noticed just a lot of iconic music being used in shows. I think you get to smaller time shows and they're still using independent artists more often.
Hmm.
That's a bigger change because I think when I started in like 2010 and stuff, it was a lot of just independent music being used in all kinds of shows, big name shows and everything. But now you're hearing Zeppelin tracks and Who tracks, and at least the shows I watch that are pretty well known. That would be a change. Uh, as far as styles, what they're looking for, I think I think over the past 5 years, I've seen a lot of we don't want any love songs, no songs about love. That was a change. Uh, I think they've got enough. That'll probably come back around though.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as lyrically, it's still about nailing the vibe of whatever they're asking for. So it's either like huge boom, party time, or aggressive, like get after it kind of thing. Um,
When
those
you
things kind of remain the same.
when you write, when you're on your own and you're not working with Helen on a it could be an instrumental track, could be a vocal song. Um, do you ever have time to not write to briefs? And if that is the case, do you sit down and think to yourself, I'm going to try and do you write from your heart and just let it come out with your muse dragging you to the end, the finish line? Or do you write with sync in mind and think to yourself, all right, I've got to remember to keep this simple, keep it punchy, keep the lyric focused on a single, we're going to have a great day, a single thematic theme. Do thoughts like that go through your head so that you are driven to write for sync, or are you just Paul Otten doing what Paul Otten does and it happens to work out well?
Depends on. I mean, if I'm just writing, I mean, I think a lot of that changed. A lot of the writing I do is with Helen. Um, in 2018, we kind of wrote is where we really started writing a personal album. we've written some personal songs here and there, but we were so focused on sync at the time. Um, but after the pandemic, especially, we said, you know what, we're gonna just write what we want. We're gonna actually do albums of stuff we want, and that freed me up on my own to write. Just to come up, because I feel like when I'm writing with her, like if I'm coming up with an idea, it's just like my own idea anyway. Um, so it's very freeing. I think we have the business so ingrained in us that there's little things here and there that might be like, well, this could be cool for sync, but it's not overwhelming our songwriting. Um, if I'm getting directly asked for something, obviously I'm gonna write with that purpose in mind. But yeah, most of the writing I do that's personal and everything is with Big Little Lions. But it's a nice way to develop songs that could be used for syncing as well. You've got something on your own, but those kind of ideas that come from that can be translated into a different song that might sound similar but is good for sync, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. If I had to distill it down to a sentence, it would be, you know the rules of the game. You've absorbed them into your musical soul by osmosis just from doing it a lot, but you're still original to who you are, but those things probably seep in. They're
Yeah,
guardrails, if you will.
yeah. I mean, I think if you let personal things get into your music, it opens it up a little bit. I think when you're starting off in the sync business, you're staying away from personal feelings. You're afraid that's gonna ruin your sync chances. So I was fortunate that I got into this writing partnership with Helen because it freed us up. We both went through some stuff in 2018, and uh, that's really where it took off. And it was kind of like, oh, we can actually just write music about how we're feeling. Um, yeah, and I mean, and maybe as a songwriter starting out, your personal thing is about your sync business.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's whatever you're feeling. It's kind of hard to speak for other people starting off, but I think writing for yourself does help kind of get your brain a little loosened up a little bit and not so stuck in one way.
For our last question, what advice would you give to somebody who has heard for a decade, sink, 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 sink? It's the last best place to make money in the music industry, and they jump in. Um, if you were having coffee with them, what advice would you give them now that you are a highly experienced veteran? Could you give them, everybody's looking for the shortcut. Is there a shortcut? Do you have any advice?
No, I mean, there's no shortcuts. It's just, I mean, you want to say some of it's luck, but I think it's just the drive and the willingness to listen to other people, listen to music, listen to the music that's being asked for, but also listen to feedback, actually listen to feedback and put it into use. You just got to get a thick skin and you got to, I don't know. I think most of us that have done this for a while, we're working off of that feedback that we get either through taxi listings, um, or from publishers themselves. I think that's the only way you're going to grow in this business. And also, be professional. That's probably 95% of how you get in good with the publishers. You give them what they want when they want it. It might not be the best thing for that project, but the fact that you're delivering on time, efficiently, um, is everything, really. obviously you need the chops and need to know what genre you're working in, but they wouldn't be asking you if they didn't think you could pull off that genre. So, yeah, I think it's just working hard, working smart, and yeah,
That's it's great advice. I hope people take it and use it. And I'm just so grateful that you had the time to do this. It was great
yeah,
catching up with you and proud of you always. I love anytime I hear you or you and Helen and I recognize you, even if it's down low in the mix on a show, I can tell that it's you guys. It's just like, wow, I knew them back when. So congratulations on all that, and
yeah.
congratulations for developing the thick skin and the perseverance, and for forming a real working band and going out. I mean, you're doing all the hard work, so it's really nice to see you reaping the rewards of that. Congratulations,
Well, thank you. Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Otten. Yay!
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.